so much. I love you so much. I love you so much. I love you so much.
Hello, all you positive heads out there. It's so good to be back with all you beautiful reflections of the one source consciousness that creates and animates all things. If you're new to this podcast, of course, we're super happy to have you here. And if you've been listening and enjoying for a while, I would be super grateful if you would please take a moment to give us a review on Apple Podcasts. It's one of the best and simplest ways to pay it forward and help others find the show so that they too can tap into the powerful perspectives and positive vibrations we are collectively emanating. The other unique and magical way to share this show is by sending any friends you think would benefit from listening to this podcast our Game with the Universe link at positivehead.com/game. Also listed in the show notes, which will serve them up a quote unquote random episode when they click it. Just instruct them before clicking the link to close their eyes for a moment and sincerely ask the universe to cue up the episode that contains the insight and perspectives that they most need to hear at this point in their life journey, and then click to listen to whatever episode is synchronistically served up to them. I have heard time and time again from people about the incredible results they received playing the game. So just tell your friends magical results are guaranteed or their karma back. All right, all you positive heads. On this week's Soul Share episode, I'm very excited to have Julie Jancius here with me on the show. Julie is the host of the Angels and Awakening podcast and an angel medium who uses her powerful gift to connect people with their loved ones and angels by relaying messages for them from beyond the veil. Hello there, Julie. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Oh, thank you so much, Brandon, for having me. This is a delight to be here.
Yeah, this is definitely an exciting uh, topic and lane that you found yourself in. And I was looking, before we jumped on into some of your, history, and it seems like it's been a relatively new development in your life, this line of work, and I want to hear all about it. And I'm actually getting a little ahead of myself because I almost skipped over my cliche opening question. So let's do that first, and then we'll go to your backstory. So my cliche opener is this: you're in an elevator. The woman next to you looks over, says, "What's your passion?" You have 10 floors to answer. What do you say?
What is my passion? Growth, intuition, connecting people with their intuition. I am of the firm belief that what our angels are doing here in this world is helping us tune in to the divine God wisdom within all of us, our intuition. And
Hmm.
the more that we can follow that intuition, the more that we're on our soul's journey, following our life path, life plan, and listening to our spirit team as they guide us along the way. And when you really get to that point within your life where you're like running with your intuition and following, you are feeling an ultimate fulfillment that I don't know how many people on earth truly feel these days.
Right, right, right. Amazing. Well, that's quite the passion, and I'd love to, as I touched on here, whatever feels relevant to share about your backstory.
Yeah.
To give everyone some context, because it's pretty fascinating how it kind of started developing for you, from what I read.
Yeah, for sure. So, I didn't choose this. I didn't like go out into the world saying like I want to be in the mediumship world. In fact, it was actually quite the opposite. I had grown up in a very religious household, went to Catholic school until my parents divorced, and then when they divorced, was raised in mega Christian church. And this isn't something that you touch, right? This is something that
Yeah,
you kind
right.
of hold at
That's
a
the
distance.
devil.
Yeah. Yes.
I was raised the same way. I was kicked out of a Christian college, so I know.
Yes, yes, you do. So, what happened was, my dad and I had a relationship where I loved him. He was amazing. We had these great, deep philosophical conversations. But he was also a playboy. He loved to have
Hmm.
fun with women, and I would always catch him cheating. So I
Wow.
heard like kind of held a very firm moral ground in support of my mother. And
Hmm.
we tried to reconnect throughout the years, but it just didn't stick. And so when he passed away, I had been from his first marriage. He was on his third at the time.
Wow.
And she
Wow.
didn't think that we were like good kids. She didn't know the back history. She just saw us not talking to him, didn't think that we were good
Yeah.
kids. So did not reach out to let us
Wow.
know when he
Wow.
had passed. And it was his second wife, my former neighbor, who
Mm.
took it upon herself to track us down since our names had changed, and tell us kids that he had passed. And I
w-
remember from the time that he passed, August 5th, until the time we found out, September 5th, 2015, every single day when I would brush my daughter's hair in the morning before school, I would hear this voice, but it sounded like my own internal dialogue. And it
Mhm.
would say, she needs a hairbrush like I used. She needs a hairbrush like I used. And on repeat, this just constantly repeated all month long.
Wow.
Um, and I was, that second thought occurs in your head, like, oh my God, I'm going crazy. What the heck is my mind saying? Um,
Right.
a big old paddle brush is the only brush I had remembered using. And immediately when I got the call that he had passed, I saw this vision of him combing my hair with his hairbrush, a wooden
Mm.
handlebar, these boars like bristles. And I
Mhm.
hadn't remembered that brush. And it just came like pouring and spilling out of my mouth. Oh my
Wow.
God, my dad's been talking to me.
Wow. Wow. What a trip.
Yeah.
Um, did you get the hairbrush?
Yes. Yes, I did.
Oh,
I think, oh, I got it right here.
wow. That's funny. Wow. Did
Yep.
it work better? Was he right?
He was totally right. She needed a different hairbrush. She has his hair.
Right. Right. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And then so from there, I assume it just kind of that was the opening for you and it just expanded.
Yeah, it's interesting because when I found out I was in front of a coworker who is really into the spiritual world, and I don't think she would like let up. She was kind of relentless. She was like, "You have to figure this out." And so I started working with different spiritual teachers. And immediately when I started, when I work with a person, their entire spirit team is there, their angels, guides,
Mm.
and loved ones,
Wow.
and messages just
Mm.
are there as well.
Wow. And how do you perceive people's spirit team and angels and yeah, is it like a visual thing? Is it auditory? Is it both? Is it
Yeah. What I believe is that the clairs work more like reading a book. And I think that we put way too much emphasis on like which one of the four clairs are you? I think there's more clairs than even that, because when you're
Mhm.
reading a book, your eyes are scanning the words on the page, but it's really this voice within your head that's repeating them to you within so that you're
Right,
hearing it and you get a
right.
visual of something descriptive. I have all of the clairs and use all of the different gifts. Sometimes I taste, sometimes I smell. All of
Wow.
it comes through. What the angels have said is that people who have all of the different abilities kind of in equal parts are
Mhm.
really meant to teach here within the world, because when you're a teacher and you know a bit of all of it, you're able to help others uncover their gifts more too.
Right, right. Very interesting. And so that was what? That was like 2015 or something if I recall. This
Yep.
all unfolded for you?
Yeah.
Wow. And then you've kind of went deep down that path and now do a podcast and, this is your full-time life now, right? Connecting.
Well, that was the weirdest thing, Brandon. Like I didn't expect to do a podcast either. It wasn't like I was trying to put one out there. I had set up a little YouTube station. Remember about 2017 when YouTube was like one static station within your house and you just had
Yeah.
like the big chair? Um,
Yeah.
I had set that up and I didn't like seeing my face on camera. It was just too much. If I could do this work and never post anywhere, I would totally just not show my face. Um, but I had a client come in and she was on my healing table. And it's the only one of the only times, definitely the first time that this has happened, where I felt spirit touch my physical body. So they actually
Mm.
put their hands on my chin and they keep, as I'm like laying hands on this person, bringing through messages, they keep moving my head to look at the YouTube station. And I'm like, guys, I can't talk about that right now. I can't think about that right now. I need to be present with my session, bringing through
Yeah.
messages. And they just
Right.
wouldn't let up, like keep turning my head. And I actually kept feeling this pressure right here
Mm.
on my
Wow.
chin.
Interesting.
Um, so I finally turned to my client and I'm like, Jody, what do you do when it comes to podcast
Mm.
or like not podcasting, YouTube? What do you do with YouTube?
Mm.
She goes, well, I'm a podcaster. And I'm like, what is a podcast? I have no
Mhm.
freaking clue. So as we were walking out the door, I said, would you be able to go to lunch with me and talk to me about this podcasting thing? Spirit says it's important. Um,
Mm.
so I started the podcast a year before COVID, and then it just exploded through COVID. And just within a couple of years, we've had 4 million downloads.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Congratulations on that.
Thank
Very
you.
cool. Yeah, it's definitely nice to get the validation of people wanting to tune in and appreciate the work, you know? It's
Yeah,
very rewarding.
for
Very
sure.
cool. So, one of the things that I'm sure you get a question a lot is, someone like myself, I've done this podcast for 2015 and a lot of episodes and you know a lot of incredible people on the show and I have so many, like, as I like to call them, spiritual breadcrumbs and synchronicity stories, like on a wild level, I think, compared to the average person. And how that being said, it's like I can't say that I've ever connected with my spirit guide and like I know my spirit guide's name and I've seen them and perceived them, or angelic entities, and so I'm curious, obviously gifts and things come through for people in different ways. So for someone like myself or those listening who like, oh, I'd like to have that, experience, and I can also say I haven't put a ton of energy into it. I think with these things, a lot of times it's like intention. How much do you want it? And so I'm curious for people who are interested in, meeting their spirit team, tapping into their spirit team, whatever angelic entities sort of are in their corner, if you will. What kind of advice do you give them?
So, when it comes to tuning in to your spirit team, I believe that you really have to be on the same wavelength, vibration, channel, and I
Hmm.
call that oneness frequency. So, really tuning in to that oneness frequency is the most important thing that we can do, and really keeping our vibration aligned throughout the day keeps us in constant sync with that team.
Hmm.
What I would tell everybody too, especially you too, Brandon, is that your spirit team is made up of a lot of different uh people, angels on the other side. It's got not only angels, but you have loved ones, tons of loved ones, even
Mm.
ancestors.
Mm.
You have a son who's 24, and
Hmm.
you could imagine that if he has children, or when he has children and then they have children and then they have children, you have a lot of purpose here, Brandon. You have so much that you're here doing. And I know that we think of 100 years as being a long time, but it's just not. We have to keep
Right.
handing that baton. So if you think, maybe 4 generations into the future or 5 generations into the future are going to be your ancestors, future ancestors, still working on your mission, you would feel
Hmm.
so in tune with them from the other
Mm.
side that you're
Hmm.
wanting to help them in their journey
Hmm.
here as well. So I think a lot of times we think about our loved ones on the other side as being mom or sister or grandparents, great grandparents, but it really goes back a lot further. And I think that this is where a
Mm,
lot of people, when they're just getting started, get the energies confused, because angelic energy, when you're tuning into it on a spirit team, it is very vastly different from the energy of someone who is a loved one on the other side. But
right,
it's hard to differentiate for people when they're just beginning. Who is that loved one, right? Is it
right, right.
close proximity? Did you know them? Or is it generations back where they're really tied into your purpose and helping you? So, a lot of times people are looking for guide energy to feel more angelic, but it feels more grounded, rooted energy because they have lived these lifetimes here on earth.
Right, right. Yeah, that's a really fascinating, perspective to consider. Um, like that your future, those that come behind you that are, you're their ancestor essentially. They're still waiting to come into physical, and to think, yeah, it makes a lot of sense that they're like rooting you on because you're laying the groundwork and they're supporting as much as possible
Yeah,
from the other side. Yeah.
100%. Yeah, both generations back and generations forward.
Yeah, right, right.
Mhm.
Yeah, I've had it's interesting because I was telling you before we turned this on, I've had some interesting um from, actually my grandfather who passed when I was young, some interesting experiences where it's sort of like a lot of breadcrumbs pointing to either his reincarnation or someone who's very connected to him showing up in my life. And it's sort of unfolded over many years. And yesterday I was, it unfold, the story like continued a little bit. So I that is a really fascinating thing. And, either now or maybe later, I'll share the story if it aligns. But yeah, I'm curious if you've seen that very often or experienced any of that energy where and I remember reading what was the really well-known psychic medium Sylvia Brown. I'm not sure if you're
Mhm.
familiar with her or not.
Oh,
She
yeah.
used to talk a lot about like how family members will come back in, later into their own line. Maybe they'll be, their grandchild is now their grandparent,
Yeah.
after they passed. And so I think that's a really interesting thing to consider as well. In this case, I've had someone who's kind of come into my life and it's like, hold on, that's a weird thing. Hold on, that's weird. Hold on, that's weird. Hold on. And it just keeps going. And
Yeah.
so it's like, is that my grandfather? I don't know, but it could be.
No, for sure, for sure. So I want to hear this story, but it's funny that you bring up Sylvia Brown, because I know that I've just started this professionally as a job only 8
Hmm.
years ago, but I have, it's almost so funny because when mediums step into this work, they're like, "Holy shit, I have had
Yeah.
this my entire life. I just didn't realize." And
You're right.
Sylvia is so spot on when she says, that you have lived these different lifetimes in different roles with other folks. That
Hmm.
comes in all the time during sessions where spirit will say, "You have this relationship with your mom here or your sister here." And this is why the dynamic is the way that it is, because in this
Hmm.
past lifetime over here, the roles were reversed. And, mom wasn't your mom, she was your sister or your best friend.
Right.
And
Right.
and so that does happen a ton. But Sylvia Brown, I have this funny story. I used to watch her all the time. I lived with my grandmother for a while,
Hmm.
off and on throughout my life. And we used to watch her all the time on Montel. So when my
Yeah. Yeah. I remember that.
grandfather passed away, yeah, I go, "Sylvia, you have to come through to grandma." And I knew
Mm,
she was going to do it. Didn't know how, didn't know when. My grandma, are you allowed to swear on this podcast?
sure.
Okay. My grandma was such a little shit though. She loved the casino. Sylvia
Hmm.
Brown came to the casino, was there
Hmm.
doing readings in a bigger entertainment style auditorium, and called on my grandmother. She's like,
Oh, wow.
your husband is here. He's saying this, he's bringing this. And she wouldn't stand up. She would not accept the reading. And I was like,
Wow.
"Grandma, This was your
Wow.
chance.
Yeah, wow. When she just had resistance to the idea of that, or do you know why she wouldn't stand?
She was so angry at my
Mm.
grandfather. He passed of
Oh,
cancer. It wasn't like he wanted to go,
yeah,
but he left her having, 20 years here by herself, and
yeah.
she was just pissed. I think she was pissed about that until the day that she passed.
Wow, wow.
Yeah.
Interesting, interesting. It's almost like she thought he did it intentionally or had say like, it'd be different if
Yeah,
he committed suicide or something.
right.
Perhaps, right.
Yeah, yeah.
Interesting,
She's just a hoot.
interesting. So, do you think, uh, for example, when you connect with someone, do you always see their spirit team and angels around them? Or is it something where like you have to go into that mode in order to open that part of yourself? Or is it like you're walking around the streets and like, oh, there's just like, guides everywhere?
No, there's definitely there are a lot of scientists working with mediums to understand how this all works, but I've heard
Yep.
people say that those who are studying it have found that there is a switch. There is a part of the brain that you
Yeah.
can turn on, and there's a part of the brain where you can kind of just turn off the gift.
Yeah.
And when I first stepped into this work, I had a lot of friends who would want me to just do constant readings, and it's like time out,
Yeah.
like I need
Yeah.
boundaries. I just need
Yeah.
people to be my friends and not,
Right.
wanting me to constantly bring through information. So it's a learning process to turn it on and turn it off and to understand how that works, because it's really fun at first too. The first
Yeah.
time that you're out and about, I was getting Subway, and this young man who is making my sandwich, his father is coming through. And I'm thinking to myself, no way, this kid has lost his father. This has to be me making it up within my mind. He is way too
Yeah.
young to have lost his dad. But
Yeah.
his dad will not let up from the other
Right.
side. So
Wow.
as he's making my sandwich, I'm preparing, like, how am I going to talk to this person? And I ended up just making these business cards so that when I'm out and I have a system with spirit, I say, listen, if there is no other way that you can come through to this person except for right here, right now, and it's not going to irritate my husband and my daughter, go for it. Just come through.
Mhm.
So I
Mhm.
carry these cards in my purse. And if somebody comes through, I just give them like a free 30-minute reading. And it's got
Oh, wow.
information, because you don't want to make people cry at their place of work. You don't want to do that.
Right. Right. Right.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's a smart idea.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
did you give him the card and he contact you?
Yeah. Of course.
Oh, yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Wow. Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, that's the thing I love about seeing having seen different mediums over the years and had several on the show. And um it's one of the coolest things about it is like seeing like even some of the shows that have been on over the years. But Tyler Henry, I'm sure you've seen him, or
Yeah.
Edward, I forget his name, years back. Just how it touches people and the emotional release and the healing that transpires from the experience. It's like it's so powerful to be able to connect and have that reconciliation, especially if there was like, something that was left unsaid or what have you. It's always so beautiful to see.
Yeah, and I think that what we're seeing right now on a very large scale is this explosion into two separate different forms of mediumship, where there's evidentiary mediumship, which I think is like step number one. If you have lost a person that you love, you want to contact an evidentiary medium, because they're going to bring through all of this evidence-based proof that it is who they're
Mm,
saying that it is, and you're really going to feel this like hope and belief in the other side. That's what evidentiary mediums do. They give us a strong faith in
mm,
God, universe, source, and it makes
mhm,
us live our lives better. We're like, okay, there really is something to this. Let's
mhm.
get on track here. But I think it's just a first step. And you have a lot of people coming through now as angel mediums, people who
Mhm.
are working with Akashic records, people who are working with guides on the other side, and people who are doing this work, who are like have great evidence that's coming through as well, but it's not in the same way. They're really bringing through a lot about where a person is going in their life,
Mhm.
what thoughts are holding them back, what blockages they need to work through so that they feel more clear and on their path,
Mhm.
um,
Mhm.
to again feel that fulfillment we were talking about before.
Mhm. Yeah, that makes sense. So you would you say that you are as someone who's, connecting with the angelic realm, etc., you're less in the evidentiary kind of like, you know,
Yeah.
bucket, if you will? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not a traditional evidentiary medium. I don't just work with your loved ones on the other side. I work with angels too, and they all come through about your life, where you're going, what's in your life plan, where they need you to be, and you leave the session feeling clarity and like you're on track.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah.
And as far as the angelic realm goes, I mean, we've all heard some of the bigger supposed, Archangel Michael and Raphael and Gabrielle, and I'm curious, or Gabriel. I'm curious, what your thoughts are on the angelic realm in general and how it, relates to, I'm assuming some angelic entities are more connected to certain people than others, and maybe
Yeah.
you could just explain some of that.
Yeah, I'm interested though. Why'd you say Gabrielle instead of Gabriel? Because you're spot on with that.
Well, you know what, I have a significant partner in my life story, that one of my craziest synchronicity stories and spiritual breadcrumb stories, and it is a partner named uh, Gabrielle. Sorry, now I'm getting
Yeah.
confused. Gabrielle. So I think my mind always goes to that name, that version of the name, instead of,
Yeah.
and then I'm like, hold on, no, hold on, that's the wrong, wrong angel. So
Oh, that's so
yeah.
funny. Um, it's interesting because when I started channeling through the angels, I knew of Gabriel from the
Hmm.
Bible and studying the Bible. But the very first experience with that I had with them, they said that they like to go by Gabrielle, and that
Wow, interesting.
they're more of a, I would call it more of a transgender angel, where they like to
Hmm.
go by they, them, and not he,
Huh.
she, or she, her.
Hmm. Interesting. Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that kind of makes sense for, I mean, you think in spirit, it's like a non, I mean, I guess it makes sense in some sense to take on a particular gender, or maybe one that's more dominant feeling, with that particular individual or energy. But of course, you always hear that we've all been it all, and in gender is a sort of a more physically focused thing, right?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. But let's go back to your other question. So you're asking about the angels and then them coming through
And
to us. What?
oh, yeah, exactly. And who, why, are some angels more involved with certain people and others with others based off of their life path and purpose?
Yeah, I think about it more so, or how they would explain it is like, if you think back across your entire life from when you were small to now, you've had different role models and teachers and mentors who have helped guide you to this point. And in the exact same way, there's angels who are very well versed and very specialized in certain areas of life. And so they're able to help us more in certain life lessons or a period of our life where they're needed. Whereas like Archangel Michael is always working with everybody because he works with our egoic mind. And there aren't many people here on earth who have kind of like lessened that egoic mind to the percentage it needs to be at. So he's working with everybody. The
Mm.
Seraphim and Seraphina, They're from the seraphim order. Those angels stepped in more so here on earth around 2011, 2012, and
Mm.
they're working to help the earth come up um to more so a place of peace. And I don't know that this is going to happen over just a couple hundred years. I think it could take a while, but they're
Mhm.
putting in place now, like we were talking about before, the generations of healers that are starting this work, that are going to help the future generations advance
Mm.
earth to a place of peace.
Mhm. Mm. Do you get shown a lot about sort of like future timelines and things like that? Um,
It's not up to me, like, how much I see.
yeah.
Sometimes I see pieces of the other side, sometimes I see pieces of the future here, but it doesn't come in like a dictionary, like, "Okay, here's what's gonna happen in
Yeah, right.
2025, and here's what's gonna happen in 2050." But yeah, it's more of, like, pieces that you kinda have to piecemeal together.
Mhm. Gotcha. Gotcha. And how about how does you'd referenced the Akashic records into this, and or earlier in our conversation. So yeah, how does that play into your, your experience?
Yeah. Everybody has a life plan. Everybody has past lives that they have lived. There's not just this place of the earth realm. There are so many different places where we can live those lives. And what Archangel Raziel shows me is that if you looked at the soul, what you would
Mhm.
see is this huger puzzle of not just this lifetime, but how all of our past lifetimes interweave and interconnect. And so, a lot
Mm.
of times, understanding what we haven't resolved from the past or looking at our life plan to see what lessons we're here to learn. Just saying why we came. I think a lot of people assume that if they're on earth today, that they chose to be here. And that's not the case. I
Mm.
think that there are three major reasons why humans are here today and chose to come from the other side for this lifetime. It could be that you raised your hand and wanted to come learn some lessons. A lot of people were tapped and asked to come by the seraphim order to help get
Mm.
this place to where it needs to be. I consider those people earth angels, and I talk about that in
Mm.
my book a lot. There are other people who come to support others. So I believe that we all have our own home on the other side. And what I've seen oftentimes in sessions is like, Brandon, let's say your soul, this isn't the case for you, but let's just say
Mhm.
that you were at your home on the other side. Maybe you're having a soul party, everybody's there, and your
Mhm.
son raises his hand and is like, Dad, I'm going to go to Earth for this lifetime. And your mom is like, Yep. And while he's going, I'm going to go too. And
Mm.
these people that you love and want to spend time with are coming through. And you're like, okay, well, I'll go support you because they ask you
Mhm.
to, or you want to keep spending that time with them.
Right. Right.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes total sense. Um, I'm curious what your perception is of, um, you always hear, I think of both of us were raised in, uh, religious households. You think of the opposite of angels is demons, and the fallen angels kind of thing. And I'm curious what your perception is on that. And, have you had any sort of experiences where you feel like, yeah, just overall what your experience and thoughts are on that?
Yeah. There's a couple of different ways to look at this. I don't believe in ghosts. I don't believe that there is souls whose energy remains trapped here. It's very, very
Hmm.
clear after doing 7,000 sessions one on one with
Wow.
people that
Wow.
when we go to the other side, the soul is omnipresent, just like
Hmm.
God's energy is. And the soul can be in multiple places at the same time. That's how your higher self is on the other side, and we're here now.
Hmm.
Um,
Yep.
when you go to the other side, the entire soul goes. But then it's
Mm.
fragmented, right? Part might be in
Hmm.
your karmic life review, part might be celebrating with other people on the other side. Um, there's different things that we do over there. what happens is there are negative things that happen here on earth. And there is, I think
Hmm.
it's John Holland who said this, that emotional energy of those actions gets left behind and can stay in a place. So he
Hmm.
talked about how if you went to Waco, Texas, and
Hmm.
that particular place where everything happened, you would feel the remnants of that emotional frequency that was left
Sure.
behind. I think
Yeah. Yeah.
if there was really ghosty energy here, I don't know how many people would do this work because it would just be too much. I don't believe in
Yeah.
entities. It's
Mm.
it's all emotional energy. So, what's that guy's name? He's really famous. I watch him sometimes on Instagram, but I don't know how to pronounce his name. Is it Gabor?
Mm. I
Gabormate?
don't know if I'm. I feel like I have heard this name, but I'm not super familiar.
Yeah. So he talks a lot. I apologize to your listeners for not knowing the correct pronunciation of his name, but he talks a lot about how the egoic mind is really just protecting us from this pain,
Hmm. Hmm.
and it's also protection from our own emotions and those feelings that are rising within us. So what the angels have showed me through his work is that emotional pain and scarring can be left within us physically and individually. It can be left
Hmm.
within a place, it can be left, within a home or a car.
Yep.
It can be left anywhere.
And do you, so yeah, that makes total sense. I mean, energetic remnants here in the physical realm. Um, Do you think there are entities on the other side who are still, and I guess it's hard to wrap our brains around because, like you said, we are multidimensional. And so as I'm here, a part of my soul is, playing out this particular character, this avatar. There's also my expanded higher self, which is not here in a certain sense. And so I'm curious, I personally think that, you know, I had Neil Donald Walsh on this show recently, if you know who he is,
Yeah.
who wrote Conversations with God. And I remember I asked him, what was one of the most profound things that, you know, hit you the hardest when you, in your transmissions from God, supposedly, and in his books. And he said, one of the quotes he stated was, in the absence of that which you are not, that which you are is not. In the absence of that which you are not, that which you are is not. So if you're love, well, without, you know, darkness, there is, in the absence of that which you're not, hate, let's say, love is not. So it's like a tool used for love to know itself. So to me, it makes a lot of sense. I think there's a lot of people who don't want to look at the dark side uh, of of the force, if you will. But is it really dark if it's happening for love, right? If it's a tool so that God can know itself, God can know herself, And
Yeah.
so that's kind of my perspective on anything dark, or any entities who may be in a experience of like my child's mother, for example. We're like yin yang. She's very much it's a scary energy, and it feels like, yeah, I just she's tapping into something that's very, very dark. And so yeah, I'm just curious if you see it that way, if you perceive it that way, that there is, sort of the opposite of these angelic entities that are happening for the ultimately for good, and yeah, just if you've had any experience around that.
So, yeah, and I'm trying to figure out how deep to go with this because,
Yeah.
so many people, when they are first awakening, they go through that dark night of the soul. And I definitely
Hmm.
experienced that,
Hmm.
to the point where I had to check myself into the hospital, and went
Wow.
through an inpatient stay and outpatient stay. And I'm really sensitive when it comes to spirituality of we have to be careful with people's psyches and
Hmm.
how gentle and delicate and fragile some people's psyches are, um,
Mm-hmm.
here's what I know, I know. I know from the sessions that I've done that when the soul passes and goes to the other side, we are
Mm-hmm.
washed of the egoic mind in order to enter that other place because there isn't any lower negative frequencies over there.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
I believe that we can do our own work. I don't like to make good guys and bad guys, right? So
Mm-hmm.
this comes up all the time, exactly what you're saying with your ex, right? Or your son's mom. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I like to split the energies of one human being and look at every human being and say they are part of God universe source. Their
Mm-hmm.
soul is the energy of God universe source. So what is that other piece to them? Their egoic mind. You could think about it one other way, which is what is God universe source? It is thought
Mm-hmm.
consciousness and its vibrational frequency, it's energy.
Yep.
Spirit says that those two things are combined, but we can separate them out. And so we do that with the
Mm-hmm.
human being here too, right? And so with her
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
egoic mind, um, when we're not doing our work, that's when we're coming from ego space, maybe 100%,
Mm-hmm.
99%. But I think
Mm-hmm.
someone like Eckhart Tolle in the world who's doing that work on himself is bringing
Mm-hmm.
that egoic mind down to maybe 1%, 3%,
Mm-hmm.
10%.
Mm-hmm.
And the experience, what life is actually like to live it, where you're 100% fear versus 1% fear, is a
Yeah.
completely different experience. And
Sure.
so, not making like good guys or bad guys, but just looking at the whole human being and seeing what it
Mm-hmm.
is that they need to come back within themselves to lower
Yeah.
that egoic mind and that fear.
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely seems to be a component. There's a lot of ego stuff involved. Using her as an example, it's such a out of balance ego that then seemed to take a turn into, weirder, darker, perspectives and, mental health, complete breakdown and things like that. Um, but it's all for growth, I suppose, in the end. And y- you know, speaking of growing and expanding one's ability to tap in and perceive things intuitively and psychically, I mean, I'm sure you'd agree that we all have intuitive and psychic abilities.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
just a matter of working out that muscle. And of course, some people are. The way I view it is like, yeah, we can all shoot a basket, and some people were born to be LeBron James, or whatever. And so I'm curious what your thought is on how people who want to develop this muscle can do so.
Yeah. So I created my angel Reiki school just for this purpose right here. What the
Hmm.
seraphim angels say is that we are on the third realm of healers, third wave of healers that are coming through in our lifetime, whereas they're going to be about 14 to 16 waves of healers coming through just within our lifetime alone. And
Mm,
so there are a lot of people out there who are like, oh, Julie, oh, Brandon, this is just a fad or this is just, like popular right now, but it's going away. No, it's not. What you
yeah.
are innately is a spiritual being. And church decline has been going on for 20 years. It's going to keep going on. They're projecting for another 20 years. People need a place and an outlet to experience
Yep.
this. I recently had Rainn Wilson on the podcast. He has this new book,
Mm,
Soul Boom, and he
hmm.
talks about what the world needs is a spiritual revolution, and that doesn't need to
Hmm.
be like organized religion. It needs to be
Hmm.
like almost like AA, he says, where there's local chapters all around. And Spirit whispered in my ear as I was reading this, book, prepping for this interview. um it's already done. This is what we have been
Mm,
doing through podcasters, through local healers, through everybody. Brandon, you have your own church congregation with your podcast. I have my own church congregation with mine. And so I
Mm-hmm.
think what people most need to do is realize that this isn't going away and that time is going to unfold regardless of whether you do it now or 15 years from now. Like 5, 10, 15, 25 years is going to pass. Do it now. If you're being called, that calling is not changing to your heart. So
Yeah.
go work with the teacher that like resonates the most with you because that's who you're in vibrational alignment with. Learn from them. Here's the other thing that's happening right now that really has to change. I know that you're like a lifelong learner. I'm a lifelong learner. A lot of people, when they're just coming into this work, they're like, okay, I'm just going to take the Reiki class, or I'm just going to take Julie's Angel Reiki school, or I'm just going to take, whatever Brandon you teach, whatever it is. And like, that's the end all be all of my journey. No, it's not. That is the beginning. That is your birthplace, and be
Yep.
excited about it. But you're going to be a lifelong learner because if you're a medium, a channeler, an angel messenger, spirit cannot communicate through to you what it is that you don't understand. So if they need you
Yeah.
to communicate that it's a purple dinosaur, but you don't know what the color purple is and you don't know what a dinosaur is, you can't speak it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So we have to keep growing.
Yeah. 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 That definitely makes sense. I think anytime you get too caught up on any one path, it's like, the more you know, the more you realize you don't know. So
For
it's
sure.
it's it's an inevitable infinite expansion, and always, always keep going and growing, right?
Yeah.
So you wrote a book as well, right?
Yeah, it's called Angels and Awakening, just like the podcast. And the first part is dedicated to helping you get into that highest vibration that is, turn on that
Mm-hmm.
part of your brain where you can connect with spirit. And then
Mm-hmm.
the last two-thirds of it are identifying everybody who's on your spirit team, an angel
Mm,
dictionary. And that way,
cool.
by the end of the book, you know exactly who's on your team and how to communicate with them.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
Sure some people will want to check that out. I know you also teach uh automatic writing. To help people connect with loved ones or angels. And do you find that that's one of the easiest ways for people to connect?
It's an easy way. I think a lot of it just comes through teaching as well. If you can
Mhm.
remember back to, have you ever been at a party, Brandon, where you're like talking to somebody like this one on one, but then a
Mhm.
conversation is happening to the side and maybe you're being a little, I know I have done this, been a little nosy and been like,
Mhm.
what are they talking about over there?
Mhm.
So now
Mhm.
instead of really listening to our one on one conversation, you're really tuning in over here. And if
Yeah.
you feel inside your brain what that feels like, you're
Mhm.
really heightening your senses. You're really paying attention to this one direct line of communication. That's what we're doing with spirit too. You can do
Mm.
that and hyper focus to connect with your angels. You can do that and hyper focus to connect with your loved ones and even a specific loved one on the other side. So it's really turning on the switch and learning how to hyper focus in.
Mm. Yeah. That's an interesting way to think about it when you're listening to two conversations at once.
Yeah.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah.
Have you had any experiences where you're physically seeing entities? Is that something that happens to you?
So that happened when I was going through my training program. I had only really
Mhm.
seen the Long Island Medium TV show, Sylvia
Oh.
Brown, John
Oh, yeah.
Edwards. And I really thought that I was having my gifts develop wrong, right? Don't a lot of us think that at the beginning? Like, I think other people's comes in more clearer or better, or they see things
Yeah, yeah,
differently.
yeah.
So I was like,
Right.
God, show me what it's like to really see spirit
Mhm.
in person.
Yeah.
I woke up in the middle of the night that night. My bathroom light was on. I know I had turned it off. My husband was fast asleep right next to me, and my grandfather was standing at the edge of my bed. Pure as,
Wow.
like I could just see him. A little translucent, like you kind of see in the
Mhm.
movies, but it was the most
Mhm.
real experience just like being here.
Wow.
And I could see him in full detail. And I go, okay, God, I realize why my gifts are coming through the way that I do. It's better to see them in my psychic sight. I'm good with
Yeah.
that.
Oh.
Um,
Ah.
yeah, it
Yeah.
scared
Did
me
it
a
kind of
little.
spook you? It spooked you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
for sure.
I mean, it's yeah, it's a little strange. Did he have a message, or was it more just like strictly visual?
Yeah, it's interesting because what I talk about too is that some of your loved ones are doing work on the other side, and they can feel a little bit more distant when they're doing so much
Hmm.
work here on earth because,
Yeah.
again, part of their soul energy is split. Yes, they're part of your spirit team, but they're also here too. So it
Hmm.
was interesting that my grandfather came through because normally he feels more distant because of the amount of work he's doing over there, like a
Mm.
football field away. But to see him
Mm.
come through, his message was, Jules, I'm always here. Like, I'm always with you.
Yeah.
I'm still helping you. I love you so much. And it felt good
Wow.
to have that reassurance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, it's the story that I touched on earlier is a really interesting one.
I
Maybe
want to hear
speaking of
it.
grandfathers, it's a good one to share.
Yeah.
So I've shared this story a while back on the podcast because, like I said, this is kind of unfolded in stages over a period of time, over years. But yesterday there was like a new chapter to it that was cool. So let's see, years back, maybe 5 years or so ago, I go to a lot of transformational festivals, and it's like, conscious community and workshops and DJs and visionary artists painting, and, and so pretty immersed in that world. And so maybe 5 years or so ago, I went to an event in Northern California, and I was, looking back, I had taken some plant medicine, I believe, like I might have had some psilocybin mushrooms or something, and so I was in a very expanded state in the moment, and I'm watching this DJ, and I'm loving his music, and I'm like, wow, this guy is so good. Like I'm feeling, I'm just feeling such like it's just taking me there. And so I look to the person next to me. I'm like, do you know who this is? This person's amazing. Like, I want to follow them, whatever. And then I'm like, oh, he goes by the name Yom, and his name is, I know him, his name is Joseph Stone. And I got chills from head to toe because my grandfather's name was Joseph Stone. So he's Joseph Stone. My grandfather's Joseph Stone. So now keep in mind the most intuitive psychic moment in my one of the most psychic moments in my life and first memorable one is in 1985. I'm a little boy sitting in church, and I have the intuitive hit. Your grandfather's going to die today. You need to remember this day. And so I looked at my little digital Timex watch, and I remember like literally playing out in my head, okay, what's the date I need to remember? And it's just kind of like, one of those fantasy sort of moments. And it's like, okay, snap out of that. A few hours later, he dropped dead of a heart attack. And so now, all these years later, I'm like, oh, when did he die again? Like, oh, I was supposed to remember, And so I'm like, I remember it was I didn't remember the exact day, but I remember the year. It was 1985. So I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, I wonder if this guy was born in 1986. That could be, enough window for him to come back. So the next day I see him on the festival ground. I go up to him. I'm like, were you born in 1986? He goes, actually 85, but that's really close. How did you guess so close? And I'm like, oh, and I told him this story, and he's like, I maybe, dude, and so anyway, didn't think much more of it. Go about with my life. I see him every now and then at different transformational festivals. Hey Gramps, like joking. I'd say hi, and so then I met a new friend a couple years ago named Elric, and Elric invited me last year to Lightning in a Bottle Festival. It's a really big one in here in California. And he invited me to come camp with his camp. He's from San Francisco. He's putting together a whole camp of his friends and people he knows. And I said to my partner, I said, why don't we go camp with my relatively new friend Elric? It'll be a new crew. We'll meet new people. Yeah. So we go. And who's there but Joseph Stone is one of the people camping. So I'm like, oh, okay, I'm actually going to get to know this guy a little bit now. He's part of my camp. So I get talking to him and getting to know him, and his personality is very jokey and silly and reminded me myself in some ways. I'm like, oh, this guy could be as cool as my grandpa, and
Yep.
we make a lot of jokes about it or whatever. But then I get thinking, I'm like, what's interesting is we're here because of Elric, our mutual friend, and my sort of, I guess, mentor hero, the person I looked up to the most as a kid was Rick Stone, my uncle, Joseph Stone's son, right? My mom's brother. And I tell him that. I'm like, oh, we're here because of Elric. And Rick was like, Joseph's son. And he's like, Rick Stone, that's my dad. That's my best friend. So different
Wow.
Rick Stone. Then I'm like, hold on, where are you from? Like, where'd you grow up? Nashville. I went to college in Nashville. My ex business partner, important person in my life, just bought a house in Nashville. A few months ago. So I have a big connection to Nashville. It was a huge part of my journey. Started a band there, which then led me to move to California for music. And so there was that. And then I was like, okay, what day were you born? Because I didn't remember the day of my grandfather. I just knew it was 85. And he said May 10th, 1985. So I called my mom on the ride home from Lightning in a Bottle last year. Mom, what day was it that granddaddy died? March 10th, 1985. So 2 months to the day earlier, he was born. I mean, he died, and then 2 months later, Yosef was born. So I'm telling. Then, so here we are at Lightning in a Bottle this year. Yet yesterday, and I'm with my girlfriend Karen and my friend Ruby Chase, who's actually was a guest on this podcast a few, maybe a month or so ago. Me, Ruby, and Karen are hanging out in our RV, and I'm like, this story comes up, and I start telling her the whole story, and I'm like, yeah, and um, Yosef was born on May 10th, and then Karen's like, "Oh, that's my sister's birthday." Who's listening? And my grandfather died on March 10th, and then Ruby goes, "Hold on, that's my birthday." And then it's at the end of the whole story, and so we're like, "Hold on, it's both people are connected to those two different days." And then she goes, "Whoa, look outside the RV window. There's Yosef walking by. This is a 30,000 person festival. I hadn't talked to him or seen." Like literally in that moment, he's walking by our window, and it's like, so we, of course, yell out the window, like, and he comes over and we talk to him for a little bit. But it was just like, it just keeps, I mean, the chances of him walking by in that moment are like, it's a huge event,
For
you know?
sure.
And yeah, so anyway, that's my fun. I don't know, who can say such things for sure, but
Yeah.
there's definitely some kind of like connection there. I would say at this point, it's like, if it's not him, I don't know.
Well, no, for sure. But what I keep hearing is that they're trying to um have you taken time, Brandon, to like develop your intuition and your gifts in that area? Because I see you doing that more so.
Yeah, I haven't. I've had a lot of, I definitely have a lot of stuff. I have a lot of stories like this that are just kind of like,
Yeah,
crazy spiritual breadcrumb synchronicity stories, and definitely have a strong intuition.
for sure.
But I've never been like, gone to training, and
Yeah.
really taken it super serious, like
Yeah.
put in the work, if you will, to develop.
Okay, well, there's some messages here from your grandfather. So one of the
Mm,
things that he's showing me is, there's two parts, two roads that I want to go down here. The first is there's a connection to Yosef. So
mhm,
there's like something in there. There's some either like partnership or work or something that you are learning from
mm,
him. There's some
mm,
thread. It's just a single thread, but it's definitely there. So you
mm,
want to kind of keep that, keep in touch with him
mm.
and keep communicating because you'll just know when you get that piece.
I have an idea of what that could be too, by the way. But anyway,
Okay.
you can continue.
Yes. The other path that your grandfather keeps showing me is that I'm going to kind of break this down into a couple of parts. The first part is he keeps showing me a funnel, like an upside down triangle,
Mm,
and
mhm,
it's connected over to your life plan and the work that your grandfather is helping you with from your spirit team. So,
mm,
we can be very, very broad. And what I mean by that is sometimes as healers and spiritual teachers, we have oftentimes the end vision first, where like spirit is like, Brandon, here's where you're going. This is the big
Yeah.
picture. This is where we want you to get
Yeah.
to.
Yeah.
And so then we think like we have to accomplish it tomorrow or within 2 years or 5 years. And they're like, no, this is where you're going, but we need to funnel the mission down. Like, what is actually going
Mhm.
to get you to that point?
Mhm.
Are you thinking of like starting another program or teaching in some way, or there's something here within your business where you're thinking about like expanding this one
Mhm.
piece? It's this
Mhm.
one piece that's leading you to everything you're supposed to do
Mm. Mm.
here.
Yeah. Y- Yeah. I can. Do you want me to answer that or?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I am actually one of the wildest spiritual breadcrumb stories I have is I launched a music platform a long time ago that I was led very um as led very strongly by spirit to launch, and it was kind of like 2009 timeframe. It was like MySpace meets Spotify before Spotify. I had my own token on this platform. It's called Industry, spelled TREE, like reinventing the industry and sharing resources with fans and artists, and had my own token called Blooms before cryptocurrency. And it's just pretty early with it, and I've been led very in dramatic fashion to that now's the time to bring it back. So I'm literally just starting down the path of like, actually, that's why I went to Lightning in a Bottle last minute, was to film a music video with Ruby, and like this first kind of launch in the fall that we're going down the path of. And
Yeah.
so yeah, I mean, that's the thing that comes up for me, is like that's kind of front and center in my, you know,
Yeah.
that I'm about to start down the path of next,
For sure.
or have.
Um, that's amazing. That's amazing. So they want you to really kind of like laser focus in on that because you're able to do that very well to get this done. Because you're right. They keep saying like now's the time, now's the time, now's the time.
Mhm.
Like it is right here, right now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I definitely feel that, and it's I'd kind of think it thought I had launched the first version of it, many years ago, and it grew to thousands of people, and then it was sort of like a um, some hit some road bumps and personal tragedy and family and things like that, and I put it on hold. It's like, okay, I need to manifest the money to do this right, and then I had my first real big success with business, and it was like having a tiger by the tail, and I never got back to it. And then I was like, oh, okay, another timeline. I guess I did what I'm supposed to do with it. And then it was like, no, actually, it's your hero's journey tale. Time to bring it back. And very dramatic messages have come through to kind of point me back to doing that. So
Yeah. So, what your grandfather just keeps saying is like respect your own energy because I feel like you can almost burn yourself out easily.
yeah.
You can
Hmm.
burn very bright, very fast. And he's like, it's okay to just really hop into something to give it your all, but also to keep your own sacred energy yours. And I think that's been a lesson for you too over the last
For sure.
5, 10 years, learning how
For
to keep
sure.
that balance. But
For
he's
sure.
helping with you with it. And what he says is this next go around is like, you've got it. You're going to nail it. Cause he keeps showing me in the future where it's like, okay, I did this and I kept my own
Mm.
energy and I didn't burn the candle at both ends and I'm good.
Hmm.
And he said it's
Mm.
going to launch you into just a greater version of yourself here.
Mm. Yeah. That definitely is a part of my path, burning the candle at both ends and learning how to like, you know, I'm such a doer and get so excited about so many things. And then it's like, oh my gosh, I've taken on so much, like, so it's definitely been a big part of my journey, is learning how you know, to manage all the energy.
Yeah, but it seems like you've got it now. It seems like you know the path. You just have to
Yeah.
see yourself do it to gain that confidence.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. It's been a dance and a journey to get there.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Work in progress. Wow. Well, this has been so cool. I'd love if you would, as we wind down here, maybe there's a story of synchronicity or serendipity or positive paranormal story. I'm sure you've got many up your sleeve that would be inspiring to share.
Yeah. Um So I just want to kind of put this out there because spirit is always within your own mind speaking to you with your own internal dialogue. And a lot of people think that it's the other way around, that your grandfather's going to come through in his own voice. It's not like that. And so I'll tell you this story. When I was very first starting this work and kind of gaining confidence, spirit is always going to bring through validators, validating
Mm-hmm.
stories. And
Mm-hmm.
at the time, my daughter was much younger, probably 7, 6 or 7,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
she was totally getting into American Girl dolls. I was like, I'm not
Mm-hmm.
spending money on all this because she just likes to
Yeah.
collect everything. And then once she's done collecting it, she's not next item to collect, right? She's
Yep.
done with the
Right.
American Girl. So I'm like, all right, I'm gonna go on Facebook Marketplace and find somebody who's offloading their American Girl dolls
Mm,
to make this cheaper.
Smart idea.
Yeah.
Smart idea.
So found that, as my normal ADHD life goes, I was running late out the door, and Spirit goes, wait, go back inside, grab some of your business cards, and grab 2 gift cards. One is for
Mm,
her, and one is for her friend. I'm like,
mm,
okay, I don't really have time. I live in like the Bible Belt of the Midwest, right? And it's hard
mm-hmm.
to explain what I do to people, and I kind of dread it sometimes because I'm like, am I going to get that look like, Julie, you're
Yeah.
of
Right.
the devil?
Yeah.
Um
Right.
that's shame, shame. So I'm driving a
Repent.
yes. So I'm driving a half an hour over to this woman's house. I have no clue who this woman is. Oh, that was the other thing. Spirit said, and bring more money because she has more stuff that she didn't list on Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace. So I go, okay. So I've got my business cards, I've got the gift cards, I've got the extra money. I'm dreading it talking to her as I'm going over. So I'm like, nah, I'm not going to listen to Spirit. I'm just going to leave all of this stuff in the car. I go into her house and she goes, I got extra stuff upstairs. Do you want to see it? I'm like, sure. I got to go out to the car to get the extra cash. So then I see the gift cards. And again, Spirit's like, just do it. Just give her the gift cards. So I walk up to the door to hand her the money. And I go, listen, I don't know if you're open to this, but here's my name. Here's what I do. Spirit said to bring 2 gift cards for you. One is for you and one is for your friend. And she looks at me and she goes, you're not Julie Jancius, are you, from Wheaton? And I go, yeah. And she pulls my business card out of her back pocket and she goes, you're not going to believe this. Like, this is Brandon, 10 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. She goes, you're not going to believe this. My friend is in the basement. We called you last week, left a voicemail on your message system to book a session with you.
Wow.
How the hell are you you can't make this stuff up.
Wow.
Um
What a trip.
yes, this is what it is. So I tell people this story because you think it's going to sound like God descending and be like, oh, Brandon, go do this.
Yeah.
It doesn't sound that way. It sounds like your
Right.
own internal dialogue. And when you're thinking to yourself, I'm not going to listen to the podcast, I'm not going to go take the class, I'm not going to go, whatever's calling to your heart or whispering within you, you're just delaying your own path. And that's what we realize so much from the other side. Just go do the effing thing. Just go take
Yeah.
action. Just go do whatever is calling to your heart because it's not you. It's
Yeah.
divine wisdom speaking through you.
Mm. Yeah. What a fun story. I bet the woman in the basement was shocked.
We still keep in contact to this day.
Amazing. Amazing. And the dolls are on the shelf by now.
Yes.
Yeah. Figured. Funny, funny. Very, very cool. Well, for those listening who would like to connect with you, obviously follow your podcast, all those things. Maybe you can tell them the best way to do so.
Yeah, Angels and Awakening podcast is everywhere you can find podcasts. And I am the Angel Medium. You can find me at theangelmedium.com.
Cool. Well, I do have one final question for you here, and it is my cliche closer. And it is this: in 60 seconds or less, what is the meaning of life according to Julie Jancis?
So I have been watching your Instagram posts. I know you're going to ask this. So I've been thinking about it, and I've actually been asking this a lot in my podcast too. I think it's
Mm,
really,
mm,
really simple, Brandon. I think it's to exist, to just be
mhm,
here. And I think it's to evolve, exist and
mm.
evolve, and you've got it down.
I agree. My initial, speaking of messages from spirit, my initials are BBB. And so I, as someone who does a lot of doing, I am supposed to learn to just exist and be,
Yeah.
live
Yeah.
each moment fully.
I like that. BB
Well,
and JJ.
uh, yeah, exactly, exactly. Well, JJ, this has been such a fun time. Thank you so much for sharing your light and wisdom. I know everyone has enjoyed it, as have I. And yeah, all of you out there, for thank you for tuning in your beautiful brain waves and incredible hearts. Until next time, journey well.